If you haven't watched the previous parts, go watch them right now. The links are pinned in the comments and in the description. In the previous episode of this manhwa, we saw how, and after a single yawn, Han Fong was out cold in his sea of consciousness. He dreams he was wearing some tribal outfit while riding a mountain goat. And from what it seems, he was also traveling with the herd of goats.
Among the herd, there were some that even flew. Behind him was the herd, as they also picked up the pace directly on the ground and in the air. So as the smacking continued, the goat Han Fong was riding was clearly displeased, and in the next moment, it tossed Han Fong off, sending him flying. He had struck his ankle on the ground and was in excruciating pain. When Han Fong thought his ankle was shattered, the goat cautiously approached him and began licking his injured ankle as he moaned and trembled uncontrollably in agony, unable to move. Han Fong patted the goat's head as a thank you, even though he was appalled by what the animal had done. However, this just made the goat angrier, as seen by the irritated expression on its face as it looked at Han Fong. It then extended its tongue several meters long and wrapped it around Han Fong's leg, and as it raised the injured leg in the air, spreading Han Fong's legs wide open in the process, Han Fong screamed in shock. Seconds later, the wrapped tongue of the goat started to glow green, and as its saliva dripped all around Han Feng's leg, he began to feel a familiar sensation. Then a loud scream echoed the entire apartment as Han Fong woke up from his hideous dream, breathing heavily. Han Fong was sweating profusely, as if he had just finished a marathon. He pondered, and what was up with this strange, disorganized dream? Right then, Han Fong's eyes widened when he felt the identical sensation he had at the end of his dream, and when he turned to look at his shattered ankle, he noticed that the green flame was covering his leg. Still in shock, he slowly, little by little, removed his bandages, and when he was done, he couldn't believe what he was seeing and feeling. His leg didn't hurt anymore. Not even a little bit. It had completely healed in just a few hours. Han Fong, beaming with curiosity, pondered if the green light actually helped with his self-recovery while he was asleep. Deciding to test it out some more, Han Fong grabbed a kitchen knife, and as he stares nervously at his finger, Han Fong brought the kitchen knife close to his finger. Then, closing his eyes in a half-assed manner, he made a small cut on his finger. Blood immediately started to ooze out in an uncontrolled manner. However, in the next moment, the green light summoned by Han Fong engulfed his entire hand. Then soon after, a smirk crept on Han Fong's lips, and from this scene it seems Han Fong's initial speculations were correct. Meanwhile, outside the apartment complex, some of the residents were shoveling the snow, while others also tried removing a massive broken tree that used to be in front of the apartment building. Here, the face of Glass Man Zhong was finally revealed, similar to his 3D animated version. Thanked everyone for their hard work. He also apologized in a polite manner to an old man named Lu Guangyao, but everyone knows him as Uncle Lu. Glasses Man told Uncle Lu that despite his old age, he came out to work in this heavy snow. Hearing this, Uncle Lu just casually laughed it off, saying he didn't do much. He pointed at the two young men beside him, the Jin brothers, and continued that they did pretty much all the work. The J brothers J Chin Won and Jakinwu, who were shivering in the cold, smiled in a confident and shy manner respectively. They also laughed off the praise, saying it was their duty to help the elderly in these hard times. Just then, a loud bam sounded, startling the two, so as they turned to the side.
Hey, quick fact, 97% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It's free, helps the channel grow, and keeps you in the loop. Thanks for your support.
They noticed that someone in a pink dress had slipped and fallen. The Jin brothers came to her aid. The confident brother of the two, J. Chin Won, extended his hand, asking if the girl in question was all right. He proceeded to advise her to be careful since the ground was all frozen and very slippery. The girl took his hand, and as we got a closer look, it was none other than head nurse Jean of the city's hospital. She was wearing a hot pink coat with a matching earmuffs, so with a polite tone and a warm smile, she thanked the Jin brothers for their help and advice. Jen Chin Won replied that they were going clear the main path first, so if Nurse Jean needed any help, she could call them and they would come running. Nurse Jean, known by everyone by the name Jean, thanked them again. She could take care of the rest on her own, she replied. Glasses Man, however, was still talking to Uncle Lu. He explained they would need to buy supplies quickly because the snow was steadily getting heavier. Hearing this later, he concurred. Uncle Lu smoked his cigarette solemnly and muttered that something had come to mind during their conversation. Seeing his serious look, Xianing asked what it might be, and Uncle Lu, whose expression now was that of a nervous person, just casually said it was nothing significant.
Next episode of this manhwa will be released when this video hits 2,000 views or 200 likes. So be sure to like this video to get another episode of this amazing manhwa.
Proceeded to say that he had heard for the past few days, an owner in their neighborhood had been bringing supplies on a small truck like he was moving houses, and that was a little suspicious to him. Glasses Man, laughing, questioned, Uncle Lo, isn't that a common sight? Perhaps that person was just moving into their apartment complex or renovating his apartment. Hearing this, Uncle Lu said nothing for a brief moment. Then, while holding his cap, his face again became serious. He whispered that he saw gas tanks and a fireplace furnace being imported in the building, and according to him, it didn't seem normal for someone who was moving in. The old man said it was as if the person was preparing for winter, as if the person knew what was coming at that precise moment. The J brothers broke up their heated argument by telling Zhang and Uncle Lu that they had cleared the main road and that maybe they should begin to move out. Uncle Lu now thanked them for their diligence. But then, at that time, a creepy, scary-looking guy grabbed the brothers' shoulders, startling them. He made mention that everyone had gathered around and were talking about making preparations to get through the winter. It sounded interesting, and he wanted in on it too. But before he could continue, a thick snowball hit him hard in the back of the head. The snowball was thrown by a woman named Lu Yan. She shouted at the guy Wu Ke Yan to stop slacking and come over to continue working. Hearing this annoyed Wu Han Yan, who started to yell, complaining that he did all the work alone while Lu Yan just watched from the sidelines and gave commands like she was a supervisor. Lu Yan raised her hand towards Wu's pointed finger and told him not to point his finger at someone while talking. Glasses Man with his usual demeanor told them to stop quarreling. The main path was cleared and they needed to hurry up to get supplies. Hearing this, Head Nurse General shouted for everyone to get ready to head out to the supermarket to buy some supplies. The twin brothers also wanted to buy supplies for themselves and for their parents also. But Uncle Lu, with a casual smile once again, asked Glasses Man what his thoughts were on the matter. Glasses Man said nothing and continued to stare at his phone with a serious expression. And after what seems like forever, he laughing, replied that he wasn't overly concerned about it. It was a brief snowstorm after all and would pass in a few days when it does everyone's lives and everything would soon return to normal. As of now, he believes what Uncle Lu said wasn't related to the current weather. Maintaining his bright smile, Zhang pushed up his glasses and continued that even if they were to assume, the snowstorm doesn't stop and would only worsen over time, and if someone in their neighborhood possessed a huge amount of resources, wasn't that a good thing? Uncle Lu, scratching the back of his head, started to laugh. When he heard this, I suppose you're right, it's true that the young ones indeed use their brains more, he replied. After a while, the snowstorms seemed to have gotten a little bit worse, so everyone including Glass Man, had their umbrellas up. Glass Man then told everyone to queue up and ready themselves to move out. They shouldn't push anyone. The snowstorm was getting heavier and heavier and they needed to try to hurry back in 3 hours when they've gotten the supplies. Soon, they all marched together toward the supermarket under the heavy snow. Meanwhile, an apartment from the lot had its lights on and it seems that this apartment was not facing challenges as the rest were. Inside this apartment was Han Fong, who was passed out, drooling and covered in sweat. His situation was a direct opposite of what was happening outside his apartment. As Han Fong began to twist and turn on his sofa, someone started calling out to him, knocking on his door. Han Fong woke up still half asleep, and as he wipes his drool, he opened the door. Han Fong apologized, saying he was asleep, hence why it took a while to open the door. At the door was none other than Lee. Lee had a smirking smile on his face, smoking a lit cigarette. He told Han Fong that he brought the item he wanted, a semi-automatic rifle, and just like that, Han Fong's drowsiness vanished immediately. Han Fong thanked Lee with a polite smile, but Lee replied that Han Fong shouldn't mention it after all. Han Fong was the reason why Brother Lu was able to properly secure supplies in advance before the situation had gotten this bad. Hearing this, Han Fong just chuckled. Brother Lee, "You're too kind," he said. Suddenly, Lee's demeanor shifted as he sighed deeply. Han Fong noticed this instantly and asked what was wrong, his voice laced with evident concern. Hearing the question, Lee asked Han Fong if he'd heard of the supermarket in the East District. "Of course. I have. Well, when we went there in the snowstorm today to buy some stuff, the supermarket was completely emptied by someone. Last night what emptied out an entire supermarket in one night." Shock washed over Han Fong as he shouted in disbelief. However, inwardly he already knew this was destined to happen exactly like it did in his previous life, or similar to it in his previous life. He heard the exact same thing and had his speculations. But with Lee's confirmation, this news was serious and shouldn't be taken lightly. So as they parted ways, Lee casually told Han Fong that he was heading back to his apartment. However, Han Fong shouldn't forget to wear more clothes to stay warm. "Of course, Brother Le, thanks for the advice," Han Fong replied, still lost in thought. Back inside the apartment, Han Fong shuts the door, not forgetting to lock it as well. Still in thoughts, Han Fong wondered who could be capable of secretly emptying out an entire supermarket overnight. How did they do it? He continued to ponder, trying to piece together the mystery. But the only thing that comes to mind were the comics and novels that he used to read back in the day. The ones about superhumans who could store things into another dimension and had the power to manipulate space. Han Fong had a gut feeling that it was more than just a regular theft. Could there really be someone with spatial abilities? Han Fong wondered silently, just thinking about the possibility that there might be more humans other than him with superpowers really unsettled the shit out of him. So as Han Fong clenched his fist glowing with green aura, he admitted to himself with determination. He needed to do more research on his ability. If there were really people like him out there, he needed to have some countermeasures as insurance. The pages of his book were filled with notes, sketches, and observations on different food items. Han Fong reflected, looking at the drawings of soybeans, broccoli, wheat, and even a slab of meat. His ability was undoubtedly unique, but the success rate was very low and mastering it was proving to be a challenge. On average, the soybeans' success rate in attempts were about 1/10, and when it comes to meat. On the other hand, while Han Fong hadn't had any success in that aspect since his first try, Han Fong reached for a soybean and readied himself to test his power once more. And as his hand began to glow with a green light, he couldn't help but wonder why his exact situation was happening. Han Fong waited nervously as the soybean in his hand started to react when the green light continued to swirl around it. Then seconds later, a volatile reaction occurred, ending in a burst of green energy. Han Fong once again failed. He was left holding a lump of the black substance from earlier, and judging from his reaction, it was evident that he was annoyed and frustrated. Han Fong crushed the black substance in his hand, determined to figure out how to use his ability properly that very night, no matter what. A while later, his table clock showed that it was almost midnight. However, Han Fong was still in his relentless pursuit, unwilling to rest until he achieved some semblance of success. Finally, after countless attempts, he managed to grow a fully grown fresh soybean plant. Han Fong was shirtless, sweating profusely. Clearly tired, he felt like he was dying, but all his efforts paid off. He had finally gotten a little knack for using the green light, but at the cost of having a significant amount of his energy drained, breathing heavily. Han Fong sat on his sofa and in front of him was a pile of the black hole substance and 7 fully grown soybean plants, signifying his failure and success rate. With this, he'd made analysis on what he'd learned so far. Han Fong deduced that when using his green light, the energy wasn't constant and every type of food has their own corresponding energy values and it will result in a failure if its corresponding energy value is wrong. This illustration reminded Han Fong on something he'd seen with a similar model, an online virtual dancing game that was popular a decade ago. Han Fong started connecting the dots on how to apply this game logic to his energy control. He visualized energy arrows in the rhythm game style, each second needing the right amount of energy input. If the energy values were like the energy directional input arrows, then the energy inputs have to be correct for every second, and all Han Fong needed to do was pinpoint the critical points. Han Fong's hand glowed green as he focuses intensely to hit the perfect critical point. Shortly after, Han Fong channeled glowing green energy and nailed it perfectly. Perfect, Han Fong exclaims in excitement. In his hand was a healthy-looking plant. With his successful triumph, Han Fong moved on to the next experiment. Meat standing in the kitchen. A bowl full of some meat and another of soybeans was in front of him. Han Fong recalls his previous failures when it came to meats. They were different and significantly harder than vegetables. They also turn into a black liquid if they fail and were extremely disgusting. However, he thought the principal theory shouldn't be that difficult. So as Han Fong stood there shirtless, staring at a meat in one hand and a couple of soybeans in the other, he willed himself. First he tried to grasp the energy value that meat requires. Han Fong then activate both the red and green light together with the meat and soybeans. Thinking that the time needed would obviously be longer compared to vegetables, Han Fong picked his spot and decided to go all in. But immediately as he did, his face was completely covered with the black disgusting liquid. That's right. The reaction had exploded in his face, so he tried again with a shorter time. Same results, then another one with an even shorter time than the one before, and again he missed. He then chose his longest time yet, and you guess it, another miss. Han Fong kept missing again and again and again. At this point, he was completely covered in the black liquid, fuming and shouting why it was so freaking difficult. On the other hand, his kitchen, which had become nasty with the black liquid everywhere, looked like a disaster zone. As silence ensues, when Han Fong had calmed himself down, he took a moment to meditate. Amidst the chaos, he tried to center himself and his energy, and once again, Han Fong summoned the red and green light. As he focused on channeling it into the meat and the soybean, the arrows flew around and the countdown started showing his intense concentration. Han Fong felt it at that precise moment. He was sure it was the right time, so he went all in and the results was a success. Finally, Han Fong had done it. He had successfully managed to achieve his desired result with meat as well. All sweaty and out of breath, Han Fong wore a smug smile, extremely proud of himself. However, all his attempts had gotten the best of Han Fong. As he collapsed on the kitchen floor with his big fat juicy meat lying beside him, he was drained and seconds away from passing out. His last thoughts were of how he'd finally found the synthesis method for meat, and with that thought, Han Fong lost consciousness. The scene shifts to the outside world where a major snowstorm has hit and was being broadcasted on television, updating everyone. They were just 3 days in and the current weather was the worst snowstorm that only occurs once in a century. Everyone was advised to remain in their homes and avoid going outside. Also, to ensure standard basic living for everyone, defenses and measures had been taken for all locations in the country. This woke Han Fong up, who lazily laid on his sofa. Tired, he leisurely listened to the news with pretty much no concern. The news continued that the disaster was widespread and efforts were being made to combat it. All means of transportation, electricity and network services were starting to break down, but everyone should be patient and stay home. At this moment, Han Fong sat up and stretched out his tired muscles, gearing up for another day indoor. He knew that everything would start collapsing on this moment forth, just as it did in his previous life, and the government would also continue to spread their horses chip over and over till all broadcasting cease. Just then, Han Fong's phone dinged. It was the neighborhood group chat. Already bored, he decided to check it out. In the 3D animated chat group, people were quarreling intensively. It was a complete shit show. Some neighbors were thinking of waiting for the government to save them, while others were skeptical and thinking about how to save themselves in hoarding supplies. But at that moment, Uncle Lou chimed in, asking everyone if they truly believe what the news said. Do you guys really think the news broadcasted by the government were true? Because if anyone believes that, then they got shit for brains. If the situation was under control, like the news said, and the government really wanted to save them, then trucks full of supplies and a support team should have arrived long ago. But as of now, not even a single one had been seen to aid them. On the contrary, from what Uncle Lou had heard from his friends, armored vehicles, heavy weapons, and tanks are heading towards their country's capital city. Based on this, there was only one possibility left: war. War was about to commence.
If you liked this episode, then don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. The next episode of this manhwa will be released once this part reaches 1,000 views or 5 comments requesting the next part.